Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, November the 7th, 2025, and today we are talking about a new irrigation system called the Sumi soaker and some early returns on that. Plus, we get hopeful about the future, and it is Feedback Friday. So let's do it. All right, Super Friday to you all. I hope everyone is doing well and getting whatever it is you hoped to get done, satisfyingly marked off the old to-do list. That's one of the best feelings in the world. Nothing special to report on my end, really. Just cruising along into the fall/winter, getting mentally ready for our first hard freeze next week, as temps will dip into the mid to low 20s right now. So that's like -3 or 4 Celsius-ish. And I think the sunflowers will finally meet their maker during that run. Yesterday, I shucked a little of our Papa corn, as the kids call it, with our fancy corn shucker designed by our old employee Greg. Basically a small length of 1 1/4 inch PVC that we had laying around, plus some small screws. And then, you shove the corn husk through that and voila, pretty simple. After that, you just have to kind of like winnow the corn. But that whole process is pretty easy with corn. You couldn't really do high volumes with this, but it's a good cold day project to bust out in the greenhouse. So yeah, also just yesterday, we got our first 20-second farm recipe video clip. So that was cool. Keep those coming to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. Anyway, it is Friday, meaning that it is Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about cardboard as a mulch and the risks/rewards. At Plants I Love Them wrote, quote, "Please consider featuring Seeds of Solidarity in Orange, Massachusetts. They offer no-till workshops, among other educational offerings, and are huge proponents of cardboard mulch. Founders Deb and Ricky were told their land is not viable ag land. They purchased the property anyway and have built a large veggie farm on sloped, rocky terrain by hand using cardboard and compost. A wonderfully informative and inspiring interview of their farm featured in Andrew Mefford's No-Till Revolution. Thank you, Jesse, and your team for all you do," end quote. Yeah, thank you. And I love Deb and Ricky. I interviewed them, several years ago at this point for the No-Till Market Garden podcast. Would not hurt to touch base with them again and just see how they're doing. I'll link that chat, though, in the show notes. Also, that day we talked about when your neighbors think what you do is bananas. At Asteria wrote, quote, "Getting approved by a pollinator, bird biodiversity, or other nature conservancy program is very helpful in neighborhoods. They usually give out little signs you can put up so people can see this is an approved and purposeful area, and gives people an explanation of what's happening. Jesse's comments about clean paths is a good one too. Shows that you tend the area. Here's to more people doing it," end quote. That's very cool, and I did not know those signs were a thing. So indeed, if you can have some agency certify that you're not crazy, that always helps. The other subject that day was the role of small/regenerative farming techniques in disaster management, and I liked this from at Lisa Ridley, who wrote, quote, "The one thing to think about is that a disaster of this magnitude will come with environmental contamination. There has been a lot of community work in the Appalachians in areas affected by Helene using sustainable eco-farming practices to help, quote unquote, clean the soil. Cover cropping with crops that operate as hyper-accumulators can help clean the soil, such as sunflowers, and can potentially go a long way to help restore farmlands to a farmable status. As there are studies that show that crops such as sunflowers can remove as much as 30% of PFAS and other toxins in the soil in as little as 90 days. The complications here will be disposing of the cover crops, which will accumulate the toxins in the roots and plant matter, which would need to be disposed of as potentially, quote unquote, hazardous waste," end quote. Thanks. And this is actually true. I will link a study about bioaccumulation potential of those crops that I could find. Sunflowers, but also mustards, hemp. These are all really good bioaccumulating crops. Ditto for some persistent herbicides and other contaminants. They can accumulate those as well. But yeah, that is a thing. However, just like the commenter noted, the disposal of that material is a little complicated because you are often transporting those chemicals via the plant. And so you can't just like compost it and put it back on the garden. In short, nature is pretty solid at cleaning up after us, but we probably should just stop making these messes. Yep. On Tuesday, we discussed why I miss livestock, but won't likely be bringing them back anytime soon. And I referenced how they did not make enough money on a small scale to justify them. At Heather Marie's wrote, quote, "Jesse, I wonder if your livestock profit calculations include the addition of fertility and man hours of pasture maintenance, like mowing. While the benefits from like my example of the chickens, are still actively benefiting the farm for several years, I'm certain you'll miss it once it's depleted, end quote. This is a good question. And for us, the chickens require daily maintenance in an area I now mow once a year and where bobwhite quails have returned. So I'm not sure there is much of a calculation really to be made there, at least for us, but it could be different for other people, certainly. That said, I do miss them to an extent, and what the chickens brought to the soil and to the environment and to the daily rhythm, as I talked about. So I try to encourage as much wildlife as I can to replace some of that domesticated life, I guess. If it were sheep in this example, I also still had to mow sometimes after the sheep for things like Cerisa lespedeza and other invasives, briars, multiflora rose, those sorts of things. Now, if I had a bunch of open pasture, it would be a different story, though again, I would probably just let someone else start that business. Great comments up and down that thread, though. Really appreciate those. On Wednesday, we talked about wood chips and anxiety because I like my pairings pretty normal like that. Lots of people relating to the anxiety stuff and how farming has helped them. I liked this from @PA, assuming Pennsylvania, PA Hunt Fish Repeat, who wrote, quote, I completely relate to the anxiety in social situations. I have also found a large amount of peace and well-being from gardening and working outside. I have worked blue-collar jobs my whole life, mostly as a mechanic type role, supervisor and assembler, all limited my social interaction and engaged my brain and hands. However, gardening and tending to my meat rabbits has reduced stress, brought me satisfaction and immense joy. So much so I thought to myself, I would love to do this for the rest of my life. I am currently in the process of opening a rabbitry, as well as have a future plans for a market garden and maybe some flower sales. Love your channel and loved your book, end quote. Thank you, and cool to hear about your project there. Of course, there is research that supports the role of gardening as therapy for mental health. I think one of the more fascinating conundrums of the world is that we have designed it in a way that actively and forcefully takes us further away from nature in almost every aspect, and we continue to lose our farmland and develop our private lands, while at the same time research tells us over and over that being outside in nature is among the best things we can do for our long-term health. Anyway, I just wish that would be calculated when we're talking about development. Unrelated, the UGA fan asked, hey Jesse, would you care to comment on the debacle that is food stamps in this country? NPR is hyperventilating, but maybe a plastic card for high fructose corn syrup isn't a great way to build something like the environment you're cultivating. How do you envision our society makes improvements, one disaster at a time or some planned approach? Do we just continue to spiral in every imaginable way? Do we approach cliffs like Wile E. Coyote or the Dukes of Hazzard? End quote. Well, thank you, but people probably don't realize how many farmers have been on SNAP, or what you called food stamps here. We were on SNAP for 2 years when we first got started, encouraged by other farmers, in fact, and we, like millions of other people, were able to buy rice and pasta and all sorts of other food that got us through some very lean years when we were just starting out as two poor growers. It was a huge help. Then later, we sold untold amounts of produce to people on SNAP over the years at the farmers market, like directly to them. This image that all people do is buy junk food and soda is cultivated by wealthy people and corporations who get significantly more of each of our tax dollars through their own welfare systems than the hungry people you're sort of denigrating here. So I guess my recommendation here would be to save at least a little of that frustration for the wealthy non-taxpayers we normal citizens help prop up. The $187.20 per month that the average SNAP recipient gets to cover, what, like $1,000 worth of groceries? That is definitely not the problem. I mean, as a taxpayer, but also as the son of someone who watched his single mother cry in a grocery store because she couldn't afford the food that she wanted to feed her child, I genuinely couldn't care less what they spend it on. Sometimes high fructose corn syrup, to use your phrase, is all they have access to, and even with the help, all they can afford. I guess maybe we make improvements, to answer your question, by caring for people who have less at least as much as we care for those who have everything. Then on Thursday, we talked about crop rotations and the necessity of moving the tomatoes. At Doug Libby asked, in the theme, sort of the question asked on crop rotation, are there examples of beneficial microbes that attack quote unquote bad microbes in the garden? Sort of like in the human immune system where our white blood cells attack and eliminate intruding viruses and bacteria, end quote. Oh yes, absolutely. A huge percentage of the protection plants receive comes from secondary metabolites of microbes in the soil. Penicillin is not just an antibiotic for humans. It's an antibiotic. It is derived from fungi. In fact, there are loads of examples of these that not only do soil microbes make, but we use them as medicines. I guess I smell a future segment there that actually is like a really good topic that I would be happy to dive more nerdily into. Also that day, at Miriam Pendleton wrote, about our pig visitors, who Mike saw out taking its morning stroll in the neighborhood again yesterday as he was leaving. Miriam wrote, quote, "Pigs are the best. I raised pigs a few decades ago and had to turn over the care of them to my husband because they were quickly becoming pets that would make them impossible to eat. Haven't raised them since. Really cool animals, wicked smart," end quote. Yeah, I mean, part of the reason we stopped raising them is they are just hard not to love. So I feel that. All right. Thanks as always for the great comments. You all are amazing. You all rock. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, a new irrigation system review of sorts. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand say they grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand is your business coach and assistant, helping to sell out, save time, and grow smarter with real data from real farms, shaping websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that run smoothly. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/no-till and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Papa John Misty, who asks, quote, "Hey Jesse, curious to know if you could use the sumi soaker for frost protection. Would love to see if that's possible," end quote. An interesting question here, Papa John Misty. Thank you. So for the uninitiated, the sumi soaker is a new irrigation tool, new to the US at least, that basically acts like a drip line that has a bunch of holes in it, spraying the water straight up into the air and out to the sides at pretty low volumes, making it both gentle and great coverage while also using minimal amounts of water. To be honest, I really love it so far in my limited experience with it, but with some limitations. Now, I will answer the question about frost protection, but let's just start with some early insight into how I feel about this system at its most basic level, since I kind of have to explain what it is to begin with. First, you should know that I hate drip tape. Like, just hate it. It's time consuming. It's a lot of plastic. It's not that efficient in terms of saturation on our soils. It's just not my thing. So when I first saw the sumi soaker, its full name being Sumi Sansui from Japan, my interest was definitely piqued. And in the name of full disclosure, the small amount of sumi soaker line that I have was sent to me by Diego Footer over at Modern Grower, who, shouts to him, I hope to also get on the show at some point to chat with me. Diego's like a very brilliant business mind, so love to have him on here to talk a little bit farm business stuff. Anyway, the sumi soaker is flat tape that has a series of holes along the top that spray water evenly up into the air and out, and there are different types of tape for different coverage, with the widest one getting around 30 feet wide off of one strip of tape. And the idea here is that as it sort of shoots thin streams into the air, it will cover all the area, not just around the tape, but out wide in a way that drip line doesn't really, and it does so with a single line versus 3 or 4 lines for a 4-foot wide bed, which is what it requires for drip tape, thus reducing labor and setup. Now, in my limited experience, some of the things that I liked about the sumi soaker is that it definitely does a great job with even coverage, making it absolutely ideal for germination and misting lettuces in the summer. I could see a world, and at least one person told me it worked for them, where you put this on a timer and have perfect carrot germination all summer because the coverage and saturation is just that good and that consistent. We had it on a timer for a little bit this summer, and it did well with summer lettuce misting. However, one big challenge is height. If the plants next to the sumi soaker line are tall, well, they will get a little bidet treatment and the water won't travel very far. And this is just because the sumi soaker is laying flat against the ground and it's just kind of hitting the bottom of the plants. They do make risers to get the sumi soaker taller, but at that point, it's really, no different than, using sprinklers, because you are setting out those risers where you would normally just be setting out sprinklers, then setting the soaker on top. So it's just as much work on that end. The one other thing I loved about it, though, if you're using it from the ground at least, is the mobility and just ease of it. I could saturate a bed, turn the line off, roll it up, move it, and then lay it out and turn the other line back on in just a couple of minutes. That can come in handy in a pinch, but also for those of us living with living pathways, which are so often in the ever-living way, it's easy to take up the Sumi Soaker line and move it, and they even make reels, which I plan to buy and trial soon, so I can get you some insight on that. Anyway, I think it's a great new tool in the toolbox that fits right into most existing irrigation systems and can at very least reduce a reliance on drip and even overhead in many situations. If you're germinating a lot of stuff like directly in the ground, it seems like kind of a no-brainer for me. Now, in terms of using it for frost protection in the same way that apple, citrus, blueberry, and other fruit producers use it to create essentially a protective ice layer on their crops, well, I don't think so. Now, I've not tried it, but the idea with frost protection with irrigation is to have a rapidly spinning sprinkler so itself does not freeze, spraying water onto the crops. The water then freezes, creating in like a thin ice layer, but as water freezes, it creates what's called a latent heat of fusion, which essentially means that as it changes from one state to another, it releases a little bit of heat, thus protecting the crop even though it's ice. I don't personally know of, or can't find at least, any growers who use this for produce. One, because I'm not sure it would quite work the same as it does on like hardy fruit trees. But two, it requires a lot of water. You have to run these sprinklers all the way until the ice starts to melt during the day. And that for us could be hours and hours on a really cold morning. I guess for veggie farming, I don't know. But even if you wanted to say, protect like blueberries with it, I think the Sumi Soaker would probably clog and freeze because so much of the water would be falling back on top of it. And then ultimately it would prevent it from functioning. So I guess that's my final answer, I suppose. Probably better tools out there for that. But fun question. Thank you. And that was an interesting opportunity for me to explore my early Sumi Soaker thoughts. So appreciate that. All right. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will talk about a perhaps negative thing in a positive way. Hopefully, BRB.
Hey, Farmer Jesse, Peter here, Maryland. Bought your hat. It's the end of the season, basically. This is my bed. I had some carrots and some lettuce that went to seed. Hopefully I can collect the seeds and grow them like I did with the carrots. The rest of the garden is going to sleep.
Today's episode is brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 47 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all one word, 26NOTILL, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Marble Seed. The Marble Seed Organic Farming Conference attracts a wide range of regenerative and organic farmers for 3 days of skill development and community building. Farmer Drew Kramer said, "Going to Marble Seed was so invigorating at a time when I needed it most. I picked up tools I'm already using." The conference is the final week in February in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Early registration opens December 4th at conference.marbleseed.org. That's conference.marbleseed.org. All right, back to the show. All right, so yesterday we took 3 questions from Patreon member Philip Kearney, but there was actually a 4th question on there, and the one that I could not get to yesterday was one that I thought would make a good last topic of the week, just for, I don't know, thinking about over the weekend. The question from Philip was, quote, "I've heard you mention that in times past you've encountered depression. Samesies, so fun. When the weight of whatever it is, but let's say the worst parts of the current state of ag hit you, how do you bounce back? When that, well, what's the point anyway, thought or feeling pops up, what keeps you going and trying to build the world you want to see? I'm not looking for help or anything. I just thought it would be a good topic because I bet a lot of us have to deal with that at least sometimes. Thank you again so much for everything. I listened to the last year of dailies in August. The pace of the show is awesome. I wish the show was old enough that I could keep listening all day because c'est la vie or whatever. Thanks." End quote. All right. So thanks for all those great questions, Phillips. This is a more fun question, I just want to emphasize, than it sounds like. Or at least I think there is a more helpful and positive answer, or really answers, to it than one might think, just hearing a question about depression. And indeed, on top of the anxiety stuff, I suffer from pretty severe depression sometimes. Nothing has helped my depression like farming and frankly sobriety, but it's still an every month thing that I have to battle. So I feel you. In terms of that feeling of existential nihilistic impending doom, well, I actually don't run into that as much as I once did. I get accused sometimes of being overly negative, and sure, sometimes I probably am a little bit negative, though I think negativity is also subjective, but that's for another conversation. The reality is, though, I am quite hopeful about the world for a few main reasons. The first is that nature is really good at recovery, like really good at it. Landscapes can be transformed back into healthy ecosystems within a matter of years, and with our help, provided enough people turn in the direction of caring, it can be even faster at repairing and regenerating itself with us than without us. The second thing that keeps me hopeful is that I believe there is a growing movement of people who care, people who are interested in ecological land management and the value it can bring to the environment and to the culture, but also to economies, people who care about soil, birds, bugs, life beyond themselves, people who can see that health is not just about exercise, but about everything around us. There are a lot of really great ideas out there, renewable energy ideas, collaborative farming ideas, ecological management ideas. These ideas are certainly not getting the money and attention they deserve yet, but at some point in time that will flip. My dad used to say something like 99% of the greatest, smartest scientists who've ever lived are alive right now. And I still believe that. I believe that with regenerative farming. I believe that with economists, ecologists, all of that. So the potential is huge. And I believe it, like I said, I believe at some point it will flip. And I believe that because it has to happen. We will either decide that it needs to happen, or we will be forced to try and fix a depleted planet with fewer resources. One way or another, we're going to run into that wall. I also think one thing that keeps me positive about it all is that I want my kids and grandkids to know I tried. I cannot imagine looking at them in the future when they ask about why we didn't do anything, if all the evidence in the world was telling us things were getting really bad, and saying, sorry, it was just like too much, I just gave up. There are people who are going to have to explain that to their kids and grandkids, why they didn't do anything, and I refuse to be one of those people. That may not be hopeful exactly, but it's certainly a driver for me, and it keeps me motivated. Your motivations may be different, but find them and hold them dear. Maybe I could be putting my energy into other things, but I definitely do not get up at 2:50 a.m. every morning to do this show for goofs. Okay, sometimes I do it for goofs, but I ultimately do it because I hope to encourage people to keep growing ecologically and caring, and I do it because it forces me to keep looking for the best answers. Then I go farm to do the active part of my caring, and then hang out with my family, and okay, maybe I watch a little soccer to wind down. But anyway, like I said, positivity, negativity, these things are all relative, subjective, but what's important is that you just do. Just do. Anyway, let us know what that doing looks like for you. Otherwise, everyone have a great weekend. We're going to call it a Friday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of November, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Christy Lewis and Patrick Weaver. Shouts, y'all. All right, so in this story, there's a young man. Let's say his name is Randy. That was the name of my uncle, Uncle Randy. Anyway, this is not my uncle, but this Randy in particular is kind of hard up for cash. He lost his job. He has 2 kids, medical bills, the whole 9 yards. And so Randy makes a rather rash and a poor decision. He's going to get some quick cash from an old man that cuts hair in the town next door. It's always quiet in there. So he scouts it, and he feels like the man doesn't take the cash to the bank except for on Monday. So being a Friday, he felt like there would be a good amount of cash in there. And so, as we learned yesterday, this doesn't go super well. He ends up losing his gun to a couple old men, but he does walk away with some cash, and it just feels incredibly dirty in his hands. He's always lived sort of a troubled life. He had a rough childhood, but he's really wanting to turn it around and feels like a bit of a failure. So he decides to literally turn it around, and he walks back into the shop. Leonard looks up and smiles as Randy holds the money out and asks, sorry, sir, is this enough for a trim? And everyone in the shop laughs, and Randy sits down to await his turn. Anyway, Thanks for watching and or listening. You all have a great week and go racing. We'll see you Monday.